Okay. We began discussing yesterday a story about Kalev. I want to put it in the back burner for a minute because I want to talk about a different hakdama to this. The basic idea is that for 7 years, Bnei Yisrael were osek in kibush, in conquering the land. And at the end of those 7 years, most of the land was conquered, but there were large sections that were still not conquered. But Yehoshua only had 7 years of military activity. The remaining land that had to be conquered was not conquered until the period of the Shoftim, and some of it was David HaMelech. And we had mentioned now, after the 7 years of kibush, then comes 7 years of chiluk, 7 years of actually dividing the land and allocating it to the tribes. Now, there are a lot of questions here, meaning to say Yehoshua lived at least another 7 years after the completion of the conquest. So why did Hashem, why were the remaining conquests deferred to after Yehoshua's life when they could have perhaps have been done during the 7 years of division? Meaning, the way it seems to work is, there were 7 years of conquest, 7 years of division, Yehoshua then dies, and then the conquest is resumed. Why is there this interposition of 7 years of division before the conquest was concluded? I don't know if we really have an answer for that. It was the Hashgachas Hashem that certain aspects of the kibush would not be done by Yehoshua. But as I pointed out a number of times, when the land is divided among the tribes, that did include land that was not conquered yet. Meaning all of Eretz Yisrael was divided among the tribes, even though not all of Eretz Yisrael was conquered yet. So in a sense, it's kind of like buying an apartment in Eretz Yisrael that's under construction, meaning you don't have anything. I remember in the olden days when HaRav was invented, right? There was a time in which HaRav was just empty, vacant land, that you could buy an apartment in HaRav that was not built yet for 30,000 shekel. Can you believe that? Now, obviously, it was a big gamble. People put down money, and you never know if it's going to be built or it's not going to be built or how many years. But if a person made such an investment, now it's worth whatever, a few million shekel or the like. So I think in real estate that's called buying under the water. You're buying land under the water. So in a sense, I'm not going to call it luck or good luck or bad luck. Everything is Hashgachas Hashem. But essentially, some Shvatim, I'm using luck in a very non-technical usage. Some Shvatim had bad luck, meaning to say some Shvatim got chalakim that would not be conquered for a number of years. So where did they live? They had to rent. In other words, they had to live in other Shvatim's territory, because their territory was quite literally not conquered, right? So that's the nafkamina. The 7 years of kibush are not complete. The 7 years of chiluk are complete, meaning all of Eretz Yisrael was allocated, even those portions of land that were not to be conquered until many, many years later. Now, there is an intriguing, again, I'll go into more detail in all of this, but there is an intriguing thought that the Malbim develops based on a number of psukim, that there were parts of Eretz Yisrael that were not allocated to any tribe. And they were there for expansion of a tribe if it grew bigger and bigger, meaning to say, there was Reuven, Shimon, Levi, right? Not Levi, but the Shvatim had their chalakim. And then there were portions that were, just like they say, reserved for future use, or whatever it is, in which certain Shvatim would be given reshus to go ahead and move into those territories. Now that's a very big chiddush, because the pashtus of the psukim and the pashtus of Chazal is that every part of Eretz Yisrael was assigned to a tribe, but the Malbim has various proofs that there were certain areas that were available for expansion of a given tribe beyond its assigned borders. Again, we'll look at this in more detail. I just wanted to get out the idea of the unassigned territory, which is really, as far as I know, it's the Malbim's chiddush in the psukim. I don't think there's any Maimer Chazal that talks about unassigned land. Now, here's the thing. There's a Yisaitistic machlokes between the Ramban and Rashi about how Eretz Yisrael was divided. And it really goes back to the Chumash itself. When Yaakov Avinu, before his death, we're going to read it in a few weeks, Parshas Vayechi, the last parsha of Breitowitz. When Yaakov Avinu blesses Ephraim and Menashe, Yosef's two sons, so Yaakov Avinu says, Ephraim and Menashe, ki Ruvain v'Shimon yiyuli. Ephraim and Menashe, my grandchildren, are equivalent to Ruvain and Shimon, my children. So what this basically means is that Shevet Yosef, right? Yosef is, Yaakov's son, actually is divided into two tribes, Ephraim and Menashe. Meaning the statement, Ephraim and Menashe, Keruvain v'Shimon, means instead of looking at Ephraim and Menashe as one tribe that's called Shevet Yosef, it halachically is two tribes, Ephraim and Menashe. And that's why there are actually 13 tribes, not 12 tribes, because the 12 sons of Yaakov, but Ephraim and Menashe count as two. However, the land was divided among 12 tribes because Shevet Levi. In other words, when we say the land is divided among 12 tribes, that's counting Ephraim and Menashe as two, and not counting Levi, because Levi only got cities throughout the territory. So really there are 13 tribes, but only 12 tribes participated in the division of the land itself. Now, here is the question. What is the nafkamina between a large single tribe and two smaller tribes? Meaning, Ephraim has a population and Menashe has a population. Okay? Each one is approximately 50,000 based on the Chumash. So what's the difference if you have one big tribe of 100,000 or two smaller tribes of 50,000 each? It's the same number of people, meaning dividing the tribe into two does not give you a bigger population. The population is going to be the same. So l'may nafkamina. So Ramban says the following. I'm going to mention Ramban first. A very big chiddush. Ramban says, when Eretz Yisrael was divided by tribes, each tribe got an equivalent amount of territory. In other words, you divided Eretz Yisrael into 12 sections, and I'm including Eber Liyarden, because as you know, Eber Liyarden actually had Ruvain, Gad, and some of Menashe. So let's put Eber Liyarden aside for a moment. So in terms of the remaining land, there are 9.5 tribes that are going to get a share in west of the Jordan River, not counting Shevet Levi. So the Ramban says Eretz Yisrael was divided, let's say, in 9 units, and actually he says with Eber Liyarden and the like, it was 12 equal units. Every Shevet got 1/12 of the territory of Eretz Yisrael, including Eber Liyarden. Now, what that means is, a larger tribe got the same amount of land as a smaller tribe. Which actually means that if you were a member of a larger tribe, you got less land than if you were a member of a smaller tribe, because the smaller tribe got the same territory as a larger tribe. It then gets divided among the members of the tribe, and we'll discuss that in more detail. So Memela, if you have 100,000 people dividing up X number of acres, each one is going to get less than if you have 50,000 people dividing. So, on some level, you could say it's a little unfair, meaning if I belong to a larger tribe, I get less land than somebody who belongs to a smaller tribe. But the Ramban says the yesod of Chalukas Haaretz is each shevet got an equivalent area of territory. Each shevet got the same. So according to Ramban, the significance of Ephraim and Manasseh being divided into two tribes is enormous. It actually doubled their territory. If there just would have been a Shevet Yosef, we would have divided Eretz Yisrael into 11 portions because we exclude Levi. So Shevet Yosef would have gotten 1/11, 1/11 of the territory of Eretz Yisrael. By dividing Shevet Yosef into Ephraim and Manasseh, we now have 12 tribes, and Ephraim and Manasseh get 1/6 of Eretz Yisrael. Right? Because 12 is two tribes. So going from 1/11 to 1/6 is more or less a doubling, almost a doubling of their territory. So the significance of being divided into two tribes, according to Ramban, was extremely important because it actually meant they got double the territory, well, not quite double, because it would have been 1/11. It wouldn't have been 1/12, meaning it's not. They didn't go from 1/12 to 1/6. They went from 1/11 to 1/6, but still, it's very close to doubling their territory. Now, you might ask a question on the Ramban. If you ever look at a map, like say the back of the Art Scroll Chumash, and you see the allocation of the Shvatim, a map of the tribal divisions based on the geography, you see that there are all sorts of different sizes. So number one, either the map is not following Ramban, right, it's following the other sheet I'll go with, or number two, even like Ramban, there's a possible answer, which makes things more and more, it gets more and more complicated, and that is Ramban, based on a Gemara in Bava Basra, makes a point that I have to qualify it a little bit. It's not necessarily that they had the same area, but they had the same value, meaning to say, very fertile land could have a much higher market value. So according to Ramban, based on the Gemara, the way it actually works is you divide Eretz Yisrael into 12 sections of equivalent economic value. But that still could mean the actual area was different. That makes things even more complicated. But that might be a possible reason why the boundaries may look different, because even though one had more area, but they didn't have more value. So I have no idea what the value was, but if we imagine in contemporary currencies, let's say, that the economic value of the land of Eretz Yisrael was $1 billion, whatever it is, $1 billion, then each Shevet got 1/12 of that $1 billion. So for some that may be less territory, for some that would be more territory, but it's equivalent. But you still have the fairness problem, because that still means an individual in a smaller tribe would wind up with less economic value than an individual in a larger tribe. But the Ramban learns that we divide it according to Shvatim. And that is the significance of Ephraim u'Menashe ki Ruvain v'Shimon yiyule. Rashi is cholek on the Ramban. I mean, Rashi was earlier, but Rashi's position is that the amount of land that was allocated to a Shevet was in fact a function of its population. Larger tribes got more land. Smaller tribes got less land. And the result would be that every individual person who got land would get the same amount of land. In other words, according to Rashi, the Maila of Rashi's Pshat is that there would be no discrimination between members of large tribes and members of small tribes, because members of large tribes got more land, and therefore when that's subdivided, they would get their particular portion. Members of smaller tribes got less land, so when you divided the land among the population, again, we haven't really discussed how that was done, every individual would be the same. Now again, if you're a political science junkie or whatever it is, you might be thinking of the way the United States government is set up with the Senate versus the House of Representatives. This is exactly, lahavdil, this is exactly what's going on here. The concept of the Senate is every state has an equal vote. So whether it's Montana, which has very few people, or New York or California, that has a lot of people, they have the same clout, they have 2 senators. That's kind of the Ramban's idea. Every shevet is equal in its power, in its control of Eretz Yisrael. The House of Representatives is based on a different idea. House of Representatives is based on the population of a state. So a state with a large population will have a lot of congressmen. I don't know the numbers, I don't remember the numbers, but New York would have 30, 40, whatever it is, and a state like Montana might have 1. Okay? So Rashi understands that Eretz Yisrael was like the House of Representatives, and the Ramban understands it was more like the Senate, meaning every shevet was equal. Now, the truth of the matter is, I'm telling you this as a machlokes Rashi and the Ramban. The truth of the matter is, it's a machlokes in the Gemara itself. I mean, it's a question of how they pass. And the Gemara itself, in Yesh Neichelen, in the 8th parak of Baba Basra, discusses whether there was equal tribal division or whether it was per capita, meaning to say large tribes got more land, small tribes got less land, and the upshot would be, therefore, on an individual level, everybody got the same. Now again, you still go back to that qualification. It doesn't mean the same in area, but the same in value. I mean, that's another issue. If you think about this is why it took 7 years to do this, because it's quite complicated. You need assessments, you need valuation, and the like. So when I say 2 people got the same, every person got the same amount of land, it's not the same amount of land, it's the same economic value of the land. So one person might get 1 acre, one person might get 5 acres, but they had the same economic productive value, however you estimate this. Again, I have no idea, but you see that this is a very, very complicated process. Now, here is a problem, and that is the following. In the book of Yehoshua, we clearly read that the land was divided up into sections, and it was assigned to the tribes via a lottery. So the way it's described is that you had Elazar, the Kohen Gadol. Remember, Elazar is Aaron's son, and he is Aaron died. Elazar is the Kohen Gadol. Right, you know this Maseches Kedushin as well, that Elazar and the Nesiim, right? The land is divided with Elazar and the 12 Nesiim. Oh, I'm sorry, let me go back. I skipped something. So 1 second. According to Rashi, what does it mean Ephraim and Manasseh are 2 tribes? In other words, according to Rashi, it makes no difference. Because like this, if every tribe received land based on its population, so it makes no difference if it's 1 tribe that has 100,000 people or 2 tribes that have 50,000 people each. Bishlama, like the Ramban, dividing a big tribe into 2 smaller tribes is going to double the area of land that they get, or almost double, from 1 out of 11 to 2 out of 12, 1 out of 6. But if I say that the land a shevet got was based on the size of its population. So 2 tribes of 50 are going to get the same amount of land as 1 tribe of 100. So what is the significance of making Ephraim and Manasseh 2 tribes? So if you look in Rashi in Parshas Vayechi, Rashi specifically says it is not a matter of getting more territory, but it's a matter of kavod. Because it's 2 tribes, they each had their own flag in the desert. They each had their own nasi, which was a politically important point, digolim, nisiim. But Einochinami, it did not make a difference in terms of territory. Okay, you understand the idea here, because a group of 100,000 people is going to get the same amount of land as 2 groups of 50,000 people. Right? So the big machlokas, Rashi and Ramban, based on the Gemara in Yesh Neichelin, was the land divided tribally, with equality, like the senates, or, excuse me for using a secular example, or was the land divided based on population size, like the House of Representatives? Machlokas, Rashi, and Ramban. Now, here is where we have a problem. When the book of Yoshua describes the division of Eretz Yisrael, it describes a certain ceremony that obviously is working with Ruach HaKodesh, in which you have Elazar, the Kohen Gadol, who is wearing the Urim V'Tumim. Again, let me digress for a moment, just to clarify a common misconception. I think I've talked about this before, but forgive me for repeating it. When you ask people, what is the Urim V'Tumim, so they will tell you that this is the breastplate that the Kohen Gadol wears, that has 12 jewels for each tribe. Of course, keep in mind, in the Urim V'Tumim, interestingly enough, that's going to be an interesting question. Ephraim and Manasseh are not. In other words, Urim V'Tumim has Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and it has Yosef. So interestingly enough, Ephraim and Manasseh are bedafka, not separated as 2 tribes in the Urim V'Tumim. But put that aside. So you ask people, what is the Urim V'Tumim? They say, oh, that's the Kohen Gadol's breastplate. Not true. The name of the Kohen Gadol's breastplate is called the Choshen. And the Avanim of the Choshen are called the Avnei Choshen or the Avnei Miluim, the stones that fill the settings. The Urim V'Tumim is a piece of parchment upon which is inscribed certain names of Hashem. It's like Lahavdil, a software program. And when the Urim V'Tumim was put, the parchment was put in the folds of the Choshen became a prophetic medium through which Hashem communicated prophecies by the letters of the Shvatim lighting up. So, for example, the Gemara says in Chagiga that there was no Urim V'Tumim in the Bayis Sheni, just as there was no Aron HaKodesh in the Bayis Sheni, there was no Urim V'Tumim. The Gemara does not mean they didn't have a Choshen. First of all, if they didn't have a Choshen, they could have made a Choshen. And indeed, they have to make a Choshen. It's one of the required begadim of the Kohen Gadol. They have to have a Choshen. They didn't make an Aron because the Aron has a purpose only if there's Luchos. We couldn't, the Aron was hidden. If we didn't have the Luchos, we didn't make an Aron. But Big Day Kahuna you have to have. But what it means is either we lost the parchment of the Urim V'Tumim, or it no longer worked because we lost Nevuah, and the Urim V'Tumim is part of the Nevuah, right? So, therefore, when we say Elazar is wearing the Urim V'Tumim, we mean Elazar is wearing the Avnei, the Choshen, and the Avnei Choshen, and the prophetic software is inserted there, and therefore there would be divine agreement to whatever the gyral, whatever the lottery is going to come up with. Okay, so we have Elazar wearing the Urim V'Tumim. We have the 12 Nesiim. We have 2 baskets. In basket number 1 is a listing of all of the tribes except for Shevet Levi. Now, which means there are 12 pieces of parchment or whatever it was, in which is the name of a tribe. And then in the other basket, you have the 12 boundaries of Eretz. So now actually, again, there are a few questions here. I mean, Chazal describe it as 12 and 12. Like 12 names of Shvatim, 12 boundaries of the land. But l'chaira, that can't be totally literal. Because remember that 2 tribes have already gotten their inheritance already in the lifetime of Moshe Rabbeinu. Ruvain and Gad did not participate in the Gairo, the lottery, of who gets a share in Eretz Yisrael, because they already have their share. Eivir Liyardin. Now, half of Menashe also got its share, but there's another half of Menashe that's going to share in the lottery division. So, although, I'm always reluctant to say this, but it seems that Chazal's reference to 12 and 12 must be Lav Dafka, because Reuven and Gad already had their Chalakim, unless maybe what might have happened was this was a way of validating the Gairul, meaning to say the following. When they put 12 boundaries in, they included the Eivir Liyardin boundaries. And the fact that the lottery came up with Reuven and Gad on those sections shows that it's divine, because how does it come up exactly what was already given to them? So that might be. Again, a lot of questions we just don't know. Okay. But it's described, therefore, as a lottery in which one basket had the names of the tribes, the other basket had the 12 sections of Eretz Yisrael, which the Chara must include Eivir Liyardin, if you say that. And Elazar would pick a petek that said a tribe's name, and he would pick a boundary, a section, and the Urim V'Tumim would confirm it by the tribe lighting up. Although I don't know how that worked with Ephraim and Menashe, to tell you the truth, because Ephraim and Menashe are not on the Urim V'Tumim. But maybe what could happen is this. The Urim V'Tumim did contain all the letters of the Aleph Beis, because in addition to the tribes, it also had the words Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Shiftei Ka. So maybe for Menashe, you didn't get a stone from Menashe, but you got letters that spelled Menashe. You see what I'm saying? In other words, the Urim V'Tumim could communicate by lighting up the letters, even though you didn't have a tribal stone. So basically, it was a lottery that was confirmed by the Urim V'Tumim. Or actually, the lesson of the Gemara is the Urim V'Tumim was illuminated first, and then they did the lottery. Although it's not clear to me what the logic of that would be. But some say they did the lottery, confirmed by the Urim V'Tumim. Now, here is the problem. Bishlama, according to Ramban, the concept of lottery makes a lot of sense. You understand how this could work, because every one of the 12 boundary points was either the same area or the same value. So it could go to any tribe. So the lottery, Al Pi Hashem, determines that this section goes to this tribe, this section goes to this tribe, this section goes to this tribe. Because any tribe could have taken any section. But like Rashi, the concept of a lottery doesn't make sense. Because if a larger tribe gets a larger area of land, or a larger value of land, however you measure it. So when you have 12 boundary areas, there are large areas, there are small areas, there are intermediate areas. And then in the tribes, you have large tribes, small tribes, medium tribes. So what do you mean lottery? I mean, what happens if you pick a large area and a small tribe? Now, of course, Hashem was guiding the process. That wouldn't happen. But if we're going through a lottery, our Hishtadlus requires that we do a lottery that makes sense. So like Ramban, a lottery makes sense because every section was the same size or same value. So any tribe could get any territory. But like Rashi, until you know which tribe is going to get which territory, how can you even draw the boundary? So the Gra is Masber. The Gra follows Rashi Shita. The Gra is Masber that the initial lottery was not a precise area size. It simply divided the country into districts. Northeast, southeast, southwest, Kinneret, etc. And it did not give exact boundaries. And only after the lottery determined which tribe gets it was the boundary then adjusted according to the population. Meaning, unlike the impression you get from Sefer Yoshua, that there were precise boundaries for every section, and they did a lottery which tribe would get which section, according to the way the Gra is Masber, he's not Masber Rashi per se, but Rashi I think would have to learn the same way. The Gra says it on his own. Barbanel actually said it earlier. There were no boundaries. There were only geographical districting. So, once again, so in the 12, in one basket are the 12 tribes. In the other basket are 12 geographical districts which did not have precise boundaries. They were just districts. And the sizes were to be determined only after the lottery had assigned it to the Shevet. So once it is determined that the Negev belongs to Yehuda, which indeed is the case, so then they draw up the boundaries based on Yehuda's population. So you see, so again, therefore, the machlokes, Rashi and Ramban, will be important not only in terms of area, but also in terms of the mechanics of how the lottery system works. Meaning, according to Ramban, by the time of the lottery, there already were precise divisions of the land, its territories, its boundaries, because since every Shevet got the same area or value of land, so any Shevet could have gotten any portion, and that's how the lottery worked. According to Rashi and the Gra, behechrech, the lottery did not have exact boundaries, because how can you determine what the boundary of any area is until you know the Shevet that's going to get it? And you don't know the Shevet that's going to get it until after the lottery. So we have to say that it simply divided Eretz Yisrael into different regions or different districts, but the boundaries would not be fixed until after that chelek is assigned to a given Shevet. Okay? So this is kind of just an important, some general information regarding the division of Eretz Yisrael. And as I indicated, the Gemara indicates it was not even an area division, it was a shavius, a value division, which can make it very, very complicated. So be aware of this. Now, what we haven't discussed, and the emes is this is not discussed in the book of Yoshua at all. In fact, it's not discussed anywhere in Nach, but the Gemara discusses it extensively, is once a tribe has its division, how does it then turn into the individual chalukos within the tribe? The one thing we know is that according to Ramban, people in larger tribes got less land than people in smaller tribes. According to Rashi, people in larger tribes got the same amount of land as people in smaller tribes. Right, so that we know. But the question is going to be, what population base do you use for the allocation of land? Because the allocation of land is actually based on the census of Bnei Yisrael that is recorded in the Torah. And there are two censuses, or censai, I think is the correct Latin, of Bnei Yisrael that are recorded, One is of the Jews who left Mitzrayim, and most of them died in the desert because of the spies. The other are the Jews who were entering Eretz Yisrael. And we're going to see that there's a huge machlokus in the Gemara. Was Eretz Yisrael divided based on the Yotzei Mitzrayim census, or were they based on the Boi Ha'aretz census? And we'll see the nafkaminas between them. But be it as it may, you don't get to that question until you've already allocated to the tribes, meaning there's tribal division, and then each tribe, the Nesiim, have the job of being makneh, the chalokim, to the individuals. As I say, that part of the story is not in the Sefer Yoshua bichlal ubichlal, but we will talk about it just to complete the process. Yeah.
So by this, the area of the tribes was determined after, like in the times of Yeshua?
Yes.
How does it explain, like when in the Chumash when it talks about Issachar and Zebulun, is the two tribes?
Yeah.
That doesn't it say one of them gets the coastal region? They're going to be like involved in commerce and overseas trade, like even back in the Chumash before the times of Yeshua.
Yeah. So that's So that actually is a good question, because to say that the regions that a tribe is going to have are based on this gyro implies that until the time of Yoshua, that wasn't fixed, right? It's only the gyro that was koveya, and yet we find in Moshe Rabbeinu's bracha that Zebulun would get along the coast. So you are correct. I mean, basically what the Meforshim say is that since everything here is al pi ruach hakodesh, so even though it was known, we had to go through this process, and this process would always stim. It would always be consistent with everything else that was in the Torah. But you're correct. There was a certain knowledge for certain shvatim that they would have a certain chalakim in Eretz Yisrael.
Conflict things with obvious, like the Rav brought up the ones that were wanted to be across the Jordan River.
Yeah.
Those are also maybe confirmed.
Yeah, that has to be right. That has to be because they already had that. Yeah.
I just want to clarify. Were we unsure about what the Ramban holds, whether the land was divided by area or value? Or?
No. So here's the thing. The Ramban just says every shevet got the same, and Rashi says every shevet got in accordance with his population. Okay. Now, I was just saying that the Gemara says generally that the land was not necessarily divided in accordance with area. It was divided in accordance with value. So all I'm saying is that I would read that other Gemara in the Ramban. The Ramban himself doesn't mention that other Gemara, but I think it's possible. Okay, so yeah.
Could that also be read into Rashi that every person got the same land of economic value?
Yes. Yeah, that's what I really meant to say. The statement of the Gemara can apply to Rashi and the Ramban together. But you also see, going back to the Chumash, you also see how this is a big nafkamina. What does it mean that Ephraim and Manasseh are two tribes instead of one tribe? What is the chashivas of one tribe becoming two tribes? According to Ramban, it makes a very big difference in the land that they're going to get. According to Rashi, it is not going to make a difference in the land that they're going to get, but it'll make a difference for Nesiim and Degel and the like. No, that type of chashivas, that type of kavod. Okay, again, there's more to say about this. We'll continue. But as I say, this is a very, very hard. I mean, I remember the first time I learned Sefer Yoshua, I think I was in 5th grade. So I still remember that we had a very good teacher, very good Rebbe, but when he reached Perek Yud Gimel, which begins the division of the land, he says, we're skipping all the way to Perek Chafalev, which is after the Chalukas Haaretz. He says, we just skipped it. Right? So for years, I had this traumatic mental block. This is like impossible to learn. It's one of those things that it must be too hard. It must be Kabbalah or something. But it is actually very, very difficult. And in fact, there's a whole aspect of it that I'm not going to discuss so much, and that is the actual geographical identification. It gives cities after cities and boundaries, and where is this city, where is that city? That's a whole field of the geography of Sefer Yoshua. But even if we don't focus on the geography, and we just focus on the process of chalukah, it actually is a very, very complicated process of chalukah. And obviously the geography will have a major impact on Rashi and Ramban, because if Ramban is making the point, unless you factor in economic value, but if we can identify these places and we can see that this section is much bigger than that section, you got a problem with Ramban, although, as I say, the economic value thing could actually answer everything. Right, so this indeed, so my fifth grade teacher, fourth grade teacher, was correct that this is really very, very difficult, but Mir Hashem, hopefully we'll get a basic understanding of it.
Thank you for listening to this Awesome production. To find out more and to partner in our mission, please visit ohr.edu.